Conversation is certainly personal to me. I have my own form of anxiety, right? We all do at certain levels, and there's definitely different severities of anxiety, and I believe that there is a source to it that we can start to uncover, discover, and release, so that that severity certainly decreases. So I wanted to talk about that today. There was a couple conversations last week where we're working with some clients and such that this really showed itself. And then, of course, like I said, I experience it in different ways for myself as well. And so I think, number one, I think we need to, understand it better so that we can minimize the stigma around it. Anxiety is just a way of dealing with worry and fear. It's really, that's what it is. It's a level of worry and fear. And if you know anything about my conversations, I speak a lot about ego tricks. And one of those tricks, the behaviors, the patterns that we use to cope is fear, right? And fear is past projection and future tripping. So it's worrying about the past reliving itself and the future, what ifs, right? What's really going on. And so the severity, of course, can, and certainly is a wide range. It can be just a low level of stress or worry or concern, all the way to truly panic attacks, is in my opinion, the physical manifestation of built up anxiety. I'm like tongue twisting today. So if you are here live, I would love it if, put a 1 in the comments if you can relate. Do you have a form of anxiety? Do you worry? Do you have concerns? And I would be certainly surprised if you didn't, right? Like I said, I think this is just part of how we cope and how we manage controlling, our environment and our life and circumstances. So my current understanding and something I'd like you to try on is that, and the way I'd like to define it is it's a build-up of emotional suppression. And that just means that we have things that trigger us, and circumstances that trigger that suppression. And, and if we continue to worry and to, stay in the future or the past, then it can escalate, right? So I see it getting triggered when I'm feeling a lack of control. I see that a lot with my clients as well. Or there's a fear of the future. That's happening a lot right now. Or there's the worry of the past reliving itself, like I mentioned before. And so these are just different examples of how I believe anxiety shows up, and people call it different things, right? We always give the meaning to the words. Certainly there's a dictionary definition, but so identify how you relate to it. Right? And are you making it a bad thing? Are you making it wrong? Are you making it, what's the meaning you're putting around it? And so for me, it's just another signal. It's just another signal that says, hey, pay attention. There's something else going on that I have an opportunity to look at, to uncover, to heal, to discover, to release, to let go. And that's a powerful place to be, because then you're back in your personal power versus the victim of it. And so the thing that I wanted to kind of hone in on was one particular angle of anxiety. And when I had this conversation with a client, I was noticing how she was describing a circumstance and how she was stressed about it, a little anxiety showing up, a little worry, a little fear, all that was there. And yet she just went and got distracted, just went and said, okay, I can't do anything about that right now. And so I'm going to resolve the circumstance by going and doing something else, right? So if you are a high achiever like me, or if you're a busy bee, or maybe you like to procrastinate or avoid, these are just patterns and coping mechanisms that we all choose from, right? That's the bucket, and you choose something that helps you compartmentalize. And so what I saw is there's not always a resolve to the emotional state we simply are resolving the circumstance by going and getting busy with doing something else. And so I think that serves us. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. However, what I also notice is that we set things aside that are stressing us out, that's got the signal going on, and then we compartmentalize the circumstances, and yet we never really go back to what triggered the ego trick or the emotion in the first place, and therefore it builds upon itself. It keeps building because we never actually resolve the emotional state or the emotional suppression that's going on. And so now, of course, this is not going to be something that we do every day where we are constantly looking at it. But the first step to any change is awareness, right? So if we recognize that we are accumulating and not really resolving, then that's when things start to really get worse, right? And I think that's where the stress builds on our body. That's where we start to see physical ailments. That's where we start to see physical manifestations of, whether it's panic attacks or just literally, various, shutdowns. I mean, even me, I deal with like stress in the body through inflammation. Like that's also a signal to me that there's more going on. And so the opportunity, again, is to recognize the signal, understand what it is, and then start to detach from the attachments that build upon themselves. And that's why I created the detachment method, is to give you the process to identify what's going on. And so I'll put the link in here. Let me see if I have it here for the screen. I may or may not. Actually, let me see the detachment limit. Let me go ahead and give you this, and you can pull it up on your screen, and it's just a downloadable PDF, and you can follow the worksheet. So it's called bravemasters.com/themethod. So there you go. Add caption, and there we go. All right, the detachment method. And so this is just one tool that I use with myself and with others to notice what's really going on underneath the surface. So when we can get to the surface, the surface response, then we're onto something. Then we're actually starting to heal what needs to be healed. So I'd love your thoughts about, where do you notice that you start to set things aside, or you compartmentalize, or you just use the ego trick? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, definitely check out the quiz, which I've posted the link to that in the comment, or the post notes, where you can actually find out what egoic archetype you are, or your behaviors are. I don't usually like to own that, meaning don't take the ownership as something you can't change, is my point. So the archetypes help you see how your behavior shows up predominantly. And then within that, the ego tricks that also seem to show up as your signal. So I believe that anxiety, again, is just a signal, and the ego tricks that it usually swims in is fear. And that usually hangs out in the archetype called the illusionist. So find out if that's something that you're predominantly feeling and experiencing on an ongoing basis. And that link, I'll put that up here too, is take the quiz at bravemasters.com/quiz. So there's tools available. That's my point. I have plenty of tools that you can access and use yourself to start to minimize the response, the anxiety response. And I think that, transparently, like back in my 20s, I was riddled with a lot of severe anxiety. Like I was definitely stressed out and worried and angry, and like there was a lot of things going on, a lot of tricks playing, and I even went to therapy and counseling, and it was like, what's wrong with me, right? That was my question, and that's kind of the wrong question to ask, because it's usually not something wrong with you. It's just something that is not wanting to be seen, right? The darkness that wants to kind of come forward, and to be honest, they even like to put a label on me, and at the time I was considered clinically depressed and then put on antidepressants, and that's fine. I'm not against that, and I think there's a place to do that, and so no shame in having that be the case. However, I started to notice that there were other tools and that there were other ways to solve it than just medicating myself. So I did get off that fairly quickly. And I'm not a doctor. Please see your doctor if you're on medication. However, finding the tools to manage my emotions, to manage my mindset, the thoughts that lead to the emotions and therefore leads to the anxiety was more useful for me and something I could use long term. Right. So if you find yourself, kind of depending on these external tools such as, medication or whatever, and maybe you need that, again, check with your doctor. There also, I think, is a behavioral process, a behavioral practice, and that's what these tools can provide a little insight into. The detachment method is definitely one way that I do it. I work through those patterns and break those patterns of my own and for my clients. And so that's available as well. So if you're here live, say hello. And if you're on the replay, always hit #replay. And I'd love to know, how maybe some tools that you use. There's many different things that we can implement. One of them, again, for me is meditation and getting present in the now. That calms down the worry about the past and the future, right? Like we're not in the present when we're in the worry. And that has done a lot of wonders for me as well over the years. So I'd love to know, your thoughts on this. So again, this is I think a big conversation, especially right now in our world where there's just a lot of adversity going on. It's not necessarily the circumstance that's triggering it, that's causing it, but it's triggering what's already there and what fears and worries that we create in our imaginative self. And when we start to look at that and own it and then identify where it's coming from, then we can start to heal it. And so that's what I wanted to share today. All right. I appreciate you so much. Please check out the tools that I've provided. Let me know if this was helpful. And if it was, maybe you can share it with someone else that might need it today. All right. Talk to you soon.